Morning, everyone. Welcome to the June monthly partnership meeting of the Southeast and Caribbean Disaster Resilience Partnership, or SCDRP for short. My name is Heather McCarthy. I have the honor and pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of SCDRP for just a few more days. I'm co-hosting today with Claire McGrath. Say a virtual hello, Claire. Claire has served as the SCDRP Program Coordinator for the last year and will rise to SCDRP Director on July 1st. Congratulations, Claire, and a very warm welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us today. So here's our agenda for today. First, we are excited to update you on the SCDRP Summer Group Mentoring Workshop Series. We have 2 more group mentoring opportunities for you, and Claire will bring you the details. Next, Claire also has some exciting updates related to our SCDRP 10th Anniversary Annual Meeting. Next, I will introduce today's super speaker, Luis Gallardo, the Executive Director of the Center for Habitat Reconstruction, based out of San Juan, Puerto Rico. And then we will wrap up today's meeting with partner sharing time. So please get your announcements from around the Southeast and Caribbean ready to share. And now for the SCDRP updates, I would like to turn the floor over to Claire. Claire.
Thank you, Heather. And I will keep saying while you are still here how grateful we are for your leadership for the last 3 years and how much you've grown SCDRP. And we will certainly miss you, but you really set our network and set me up very well for success over the next years to come. All right, so jumping into a couple of updates, we have 2 sessions left in our group mentorship series, Pathways to Resilience, Learning with Leaders and Connecting with Peers. This series is a great opportunity for students, early career professionals, people who are new to the field of resilience, or if you're just looking for connections, looking to expand your network. This is an opportunity to learn from experts in the field, our mentors, in a virtual small group setting. Our first 3 sessions have been really valuable networking opportunities, both with the mentors, but also with the other participants. Next slide, please. Our next session will be led by Brian Byfield, Resilience Planner for the state of North Carolina, and that will be on July 11th at 12 p.m. Brian is a member of our advisory board, and he brings 3 decades of professional experience across sustainability and resiliency planning, transportation infrastructure development, and land use optimization. So really valuable opportunity to learn from Brian. Email us at scdrp@socorro.org if you are interested in joining. Next slide. Next up, we are thrilled to announce the location of the SCDRP 10th Anniversary Annual Meeting. It will be held in Charleston, South Carolina. This monumental meeting will be held the first week of March at the College of Charleston. The college is located right in the heart of the city, so really fantastic location. And we will share the exact date soon, but it will be that first week of March 2026. And we hope that you can all join us to celebrate 10 years of SCDRP. Next slide. We will be forming the annual meeting steering committee soon. The steering committee is a short-term ad hoc committee open to SCDRP members. The steering committee is really important to the development of the content of the annual meeting. The committee also invites speakers and panelists, organizes field trips and ongoing education opportunities, invites sponsors, and helps us solicit donations to cover the cost of the meeting and to provide scholarships. Next slide. We will hold 1-hour virtual meetings every month. We're aiming to start this year around late August, maybe early September. And the meeting frequency will probably increase to every 2 weeks or so in the time leading up to the meeting in early March. This is a really great way to bring attention to issues that are important to your organization, and to network with other SCDRP members. So spots on the steering committee are limited this year, and we are going to fill the committee um, using a short application process this year. So applications will be released soon. So stay tuned for that. We will provide plenty of advertising to let you know when you can sign up. Next slide. Lastly, we are looking for sponsors for the SCDRP 10th anniversary annual meeting. We have a variety of sponsorship levels available. Sponsorship funds are used to support needs-based registration scholarships, poster sessions, educational field trips, network opportunities, and community interactions. It's a really fantastic opportunity to promote your organization, and to support regional resilience. So email us, scdrp@socorro.org, for the sponsorship packet, or if you have more questions. And with that, I will hand it back over to Heather.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, such exciting stuff going on this summer, and extremely excited that SCDRP will be hosting their next annual meeting in Charleston, South Carolina. It's fantastic. And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's super speaker, Luis Gallardo, joining us live from Puerto Rico. Luis is the executive director of the Center for Habitat Reconstruction, a Puerto Rico-based nonprofit dedicated to promoting the conversion of vacant and abandoned properties for affordable housing, resiliency, and community development. Luis has ample experience as a consultant for nonprofits, community-based organizations, and city governments on issues of property rights, nuisance abatement, and municipal law. With a Master of Public Administration with a concentration in city management from Valdosta State University in Georgia, as well as a Juris Doctor from the University of Puerto Rico, Luis has demonstrated a particular interest in tenure security, community participation, and blight control. Luis recently published an article entitled Public Nuisances in Puerto Rico in the University of Puerto Rico Law Journal. He also published research with the Federal Reserve and the Center for Community Progress in a joint article entitled People Without Homes, Homes Without People, Abandoned Properties as Opportunities for Affordable Housing in the Post-Disaster Reconstruction Environment. So today we are here for this incredible opportunity to hear from an attorney. We have not had many lawyers come speak in this resilience space. Yet, when it comes to proving who owns the dirt that turned into water, or heirs property rights, land that has been passed down for generations, or fair compensation for property that experiences serial disasters or becomes unsafe to occupy, or that tough topic of climate migration, and many other situations that we haven't even thought of yet, but our future will bring us. We're going to need the attorneys, and we must have that legal perspective and expertise in the room to plan for long-term climate adaptation and enduring resilience for all of our vulnerable communities. Luis, thank you so much for taking time to join us today, and a very warm SCDRP welcome to you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the super speaker title. I'm going to try to do the best I can, but it's an honor for me to be here. I have a okay, great. So let me know if everything comes out fine on the screen.
Looks good, Luis. I see your slides.
Excellent. And it might be a good thing you don't have too many lawyers speak. Lawyers tend to complicate things. So a lot of my lawyer work is to try to unravel and simplify things that other lawyers do. So at the
Ah,
end of the day, it might be a good thing. But obviously, you'll see through a lot of the work that we do emphasize a very big disciplinary approach. Our team has social workers. We have planners, GIS specialists, and so on. So it's that fusion and combination of skills that I think helps push our organizations ahead. Again, thank you all. My name is Luis Gallardo. Everybody calls me Gallardo by my last name. If you call me Luis walking down the street, I may keep walking. I am the executive director and the co-founder of a Puerto Rico-based nonprofit called the Center for Habitat Reconstruction, or the CRH in its Spanish acronym, Centro para Reconstrucción del Hábitat. We are a 501c3 mission-based organization, and our mission is quite simple. We want to address vacancy and abandonment in Puerto Rico and find a way to leverage these spaces to promote community development. That could be manifested through conservation. It could be manifested through placemaking efforts. But our daily bread and butter is housing. So we do a lot of housing work, but we end up collaborating with other things as well. Over the last few years, our activities have diversified a bit, sometimes through us directly, and other instances through affiliated subsidiaries, depending on how complex the issue is. But for the most part, we address the vacancy and abandonment issue through a diversity of angles. We work with local governments. We also work with community groups. Sometimes those community groups and governments do not see eye to eye. Sometimes they're already partnering when we arrive. Um, and sometimes we've had to play the role of mediator or facilitator in those conversations. We also provide a grand diversity of services, including like technical support and legal support for specific projects. A community that wants to convert a vacant abandoned school, for example, into a resiliency center. Maybe they need a little help getting some engineers or doing some as-built or putting together a proposal, or maybe even incorporating their organization so that they could position themselves to receive funding. We also do a lot of advocacy work. We try to release at least one publication per year, whether it be a paper or a report, sometimes guidebooks and things of the sort. Frank Alexander's on this call, and one of our publications was a Spanish translation of the Community Land Bank book written by Frank. So we do try to publish a diversity of materials that can help assess vacancy and abandonment from different perspectives. I mentioned that we did provide legal assistance to specific projects, placemaking projects, but we could also provide legal assistance to other nonprofits, organizations, or even citizens. And lately, we've been identifying, we've been able to hone down, as we'll see in the next few slides, what is that typology of abandonment. We can look at a house, even if it's occupied, and have a good idea of whether or not 10 years from now this property could be abandoned. And so we're trying to shift not only from remediating abandonment, but also preventing it. So if it's something as simple as providing legal aid to an elderly citizen so that she can get her will in place and make sure that, hopefully she'll last as long as she can, but if something happens to her family can be in a position where they could keep using that property or hand it over to someone who does use it and prevent it from becoming an abandoned property. And most recently, we have been getting into some very small scale development work, particularly through our subsidiary Desarrollo CRH, which is a CHODO, or Community Housing Development Organization. And here we do collaborate sometimes with Fannie Mae, HUD, and other REO type settings, but we are getting into a little bit of development per se. But the idea is to just kickstart investment in certain areas and kind of provide a model for community land banks and other nonprofits. Right now, we work in a total of 23 municipalities. We collaborate directly with the local governments in creating and implementing public nuisance and code enforcement programs. Our code enforcement programs are specifically geared towards vacancy and abandonment. Many years ago, I worked in a local government in Alabama, and my job was to send that nasty letter to the citizen living in his home who changed his door color and it didn't coincide with the downtown historic guidelines. So we don't get in that, your grass is tall, you need to cut it. We concentrate specifically on vacancy and abandonment, even though we obviously do intersect with more wider code enforcement work, again, from the prevention standpoint. So with a lot of these communities, we either administer or co-administer a public nuisance program, and geared towards an end product, which will produce affordable housing or vacant abandoned or community land banks. Sometimes we get approached municipalities who may just have a different vision. They're not really interested in affordable housing, or maybe they'll work just solely economic development. But if there is no component of affordability, then we can refer to them excellent firms and attorneys who will do this kind of work. But we don't, for example, administer code enforcement programs that are geared towards turning abandoned properties into short-term rentals, for example. That's not our jam. But if you want to do affordable housing, we'll work with your city. This is part of our team. As I said, we have a good multidisciplinary crew. We have folks who have experience working in things like FEMA and local government, and also philanthropy and things of the sort. But we have a very, very diverse crew with a lot of they support in so many different ways that I can have a whole presentation on workforce diversity and how these intersectoral approaches can benefit us. But going to the numbers, right now Puerto Rico is suffering a vacancy and abandonment crisis. According to the U.S. Census, about 1 out of every 4 properties is vacant. Of course, we need to make the disclaimer that that does include second residencies and things of the sort. But according to a HUD report, there's 300,000 properties that could be categorized as other vacant that are not even on the market. Right now in Puerto Rico, we have almost 700 schools that have been closed in the last 10 years. A lot of that has to do with the fiscal crisis that Puerto Rico has experimented, as well as population shifts in different regions of Puerto Rico. And right now, most of those schools are vacant and abandoned. A lot of them have turned into dilapidated nuisances for the communities. We got into the school issue here in Puerto Rico because we were doing inventories and noticed that sometimes the biggest vacant property was an abandoned school that was owned by the government that probably was double or triple the square footage of all the other vacant and abandoned properties combined. So it was difficult for us to go through a community without addressing the school issue. And then there is an unknown amount of businesses, industrial spots, and vacant lots. Right now, we are collaborating with the Department of Housing in Puerto Rico to do an island-wide inventory of vacant abandoned properties, which we are currently at the 50,000 property mark, but our goal is to hit 109,000 by 2027. Now, back in 2022, we published a paper that analyzed our wonderful access to data with code enforcement programs in about 7 municipalities. We had the opportunity to take a look at about 1,800 vacant and abandoned properties within a diversity of inventories, about 900 of those which have already passed from start to finish through code enforcement programs. So it provided us with an amazing amount of data regarding who owns what's the quality of these homes, and we were able to quantitatively demonstrate that code enforcement programs in Puerto Rico do work. They do work, and if you can get a hold of an owner, you can most likely have a 90% chance that owner will fix their property. But it also demonstrated some structural issues that I personally have seen when I worked in Alabama many years ago among African American communities. We would stumble upon informality, title issues, inheritance issues, and things of the sort. So these are things that I think you will see throughout the South. Just to give you an example of some of the title-related issues, only about 71% of the properties that fell within these vacant abandoned property inventories were registered in a formal cadastral system, meaning that there was about a third of properties that we can consider, informal or self-constructed, as I sometimes say. About when we started sending out these notices to all these properties, only 29% of the addresses worked, which means that our local tax registry was grossly out of date. Citizens do not proactively update their addresses with the tax rolls and so on. And we were only able to find 12% of these vacant abandoned properties of public deeds registered in the property register. In Puerto Rico, the property register is a voluntary system, so you can have transactions of properties that have no legal requirement to be registered publicly, but for the most part, things like condominiums and mortgages have to be registered. But if I'm selling a property to John Doe and it's a cash sale, we do not have to get it registered. So you'll see that reflected disproportionately within vacant abandoned properties. In other words, grandma passes away, grandkids get the house, they don't have a clear tract or paperwork on it. It's maybe owning money, or it's not in the tax rolls, and it's just too expensive for them to rescue. So it's more cost effective than just abandoned property. We identified that 43% of these properties are heir properties, and they have multiple owners. Usually siblings, uncles, aunts, and so on. About 45% of the owners do not live within the municipality. So they do not see on a day-to-day basis, and they do not suffer the consequences of that vacant abandoned property. Usually they will be from the closest metropolitan area. They'll live an hour away, which was shocking because we saw that only 9% of the owners lived stateside. We thought that that stateside number would be bigger, just because of population changes in the last few years. But through these numbers here, we can conclude that internal migration, displacement, social mobility, things like that are a bigger factor than someone leaving Puerto Rico to the U.S. So we were able to identify who owned what, which obviously helps us hone that public policy on the local level. About 39% of these vacant abandoned properties had tax debts. The average tax debt was about $34,000. And about 29% of properties did not have tax debts, but they had undue, like homestead type tax exemptions, where the tax collection agency still thought that the property was being occupied by a low income homeowner and thus did not charge any property taxes. So this helps us work with local tax agencies to kind of identify those properties, revoke those undue tax exemptions. And I always say that this is one of those few areas within public policy where the more debt, the better, because this debt here is leverage for the municipality. And we have a variety of different legal tools which help us help the municipality move in on those properties. And obviously, the more debt it has, the better, easier it is for the city to acquire it and pass it on to like a community land bank or a third party. But obviously, the more debt, more likely the longer it's been abandoned, more likely the worse condition it's in. So when we looked at what happened with these code enforcement letters, approximately about 44% of the owners appeared and about 40% of the homes were repaired. That's why I say if you can get the owner to appear, you have a 90% chance they're going to fix the property. That small sliver of property owners that show up and disappear usually are, a distant family member who might be a member of a very big, family, and they'll show up. And you'll see a lot of emotional components here. That was grandma's house. That's mom's house. Please don't take it away. We'll fix it. But when they start looking at what the property needs, or they see that the property owes $34,000 in debt, well, a lot of that emotional attachment goes out the window. So we've seen families literally beg not to get a nuisance program notice, but when the city starts working with them to kind of iron out a long-term plan, they'll back out and say, you know what, it's not cost effective, or my other family members are not responding and I don't want to shelve these costs, and so on. But for the most part, if the owner appears, it will be fixed. And only about 24% of property owners do request some sort of administrative hearing. The rest of them are not contested. Most owners will happily fix the property. I always say the 20-80 rule: 80% of the time is going to go into 20% of your cases. And usually those are the ones that might be in denial, or they'll just cut the grass and 6 months later you need to send them another notice. But for the most part, we have very little issues. Property owners tend to voluntarily step up. And big part of our program, one of the things I wanted to mention is we do provide that legal support as well, which kind of puts us in a difficult position sometimes, because we're supporting the city to send out these notices and implement code enforcement programs. But on the other hand, we're also providing some sort of support or information to the property owners. At the end of the day, we just want the property fixed. We don't want cities to take away properties from owners who are willing to step up. So sometimes a property owner, all they need is, an hour or two of legal consultation, or we need to explain to them how, air properties work, or what the steps they need to take for them to, enforce their property rights and so on. So at the end of the day, we just want the properties fixed. And fortunately, our municipalities are comfortable with us sitting down with both parties and kind of working something out. So taking this into a disaster recovery context, here is a satellite photo of Hurricane Maria. And you can see the outline of Puerto Rico kind of superimposed on that photo. And it demonstrates that, all of Puerto Rico was just thrashed by a natural disaster. And this was 3 weeks after another natural disaster, which was Hurricane Irma, which I don't remember, it was a 4 or 5 category hurricane. But it was, we were just getting, electricity reconnected when we got smashed by Maria. So in Maria, there were maximum winds 155 miles per hour, 9-inch maximum tidal waves, massive rainfalls, which obviously resulted in some significant damage. 1.1 million homes damaged. If I remember correctly, I think that census said that there was 1.5 million homes in Puerto Rico. So we're talking about most homes were damaged. About $31 billion in damages, and almost 3,000 deaths occurred strictly from Hurricane Maria. So it was harsh. And when you start looking at how that affects our vacant abandoned property inventory, we were able to identify that 8% of the abandoned properties, that the increase was 8%. So if you look at the inventories pre and post Maria, Maria increased that abandonment rate by 8%. And we were also able to identify within 36% of our vacant abandoned properties damages that were directly correlated to Hurricane Maria. So this could be like a tree that we could see damage the roof. Sometimes properties were abandoned already, but maybe they just had some broken windows and some trash, but Hurricane Maria ripped off the roof and knocked down a wall. So it worsened our inventory, you could say. And about 25% of these vacant abandoned properties are within flood zones. So we did see that there was a disproportionate amount of vacant abandoned properties within areas that were sensitive towards these natural disasters. I'm going to provide a case study here. This is the municipality of Toa Baja. This is one of my favorite municipalities to work with, because we have a mayor who's just so on board with addressing vacancy and abandonment, and he has quite a lot of vision, which I'll explain in a moment how it is he packaged his request for assistance. But all of these blue areas are floodplains, according to some FEMA maps. All of us who work in this field know that the FEMA maps are not perfect, but it gives us an idea. And but yes, about half of the municipality does fall within a flood zone, at least some type of flood zone, including the 500-year floodplain. And my apologies to the GIS nerds on the call, if any, but we just kind of tried to simplify it, made it one single color as opposed to showing the gradient of different alternatives. But just to kind of simplify it here, 50% of the municipality does fall within a floodplain, and obviously this does result in some horrible things. When we had Hurricane Maria, here's a big sign that welcomes communities, individuals to this community in Toa Baja, Toaville. That's actually, pardon for the photo, but that's actually a cow that was floating from a farm nearby. So you can see how drastic. This is the entrance to the community. The entire community was underwater. This was maybe 1 or 2 days after the hurricane passed, and here we have photos of National Guard and other city officials getting people out of their home. And so obviously this does result in all sorts of mitigation and reconstruction efforts. Here is a example of one such mitigation effort. This is a massive public work that was being planned and has already begun between Toa Baja and its neighboring municipality, Dorado. It's a massive project. It's going to take many years to finish. It's impressive when you drive past and just see just how big the scope of this project was. But the estimate is that after this public work is carried out, the floodplain will decrease 80%. So again, it's a massive project. It has massive uh, impact on the community. I don't think I don't think there's one jurisdiction that's been hit by a natural disaster that has not floated massive projects such as this. And again, I apologize for this plan. I don't know if there's anybody here from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer, but it's easy for me to spot one of these from the Army Corps of Engineer from afar because they try to pack too much information into one single document. But these lines in the middle are different public works they're planning to do for the Rio de la Plata. So great, the state and the federal government are going to invest massive amounts of money in mitigating these flood risks for the surrounding communities. But what are the effects of that? And one thing that you can identify is that the value of land increases. Obviously, now this is not a floodplain, so now it's more attractive to live here. So we have started spotting vacant abandoned properties for the first time in these regions being bought up in bunches by LLCs and holding companies that have no interest on fixing the property. They're just holding on to it, waiting for payday. So we're in these code enforcement programs. We're starting to spot these LLCs pop up and just buy all these massive amounts of properties and just sit on them. Unfortunately, a lot of the folks who are displaced or who are bought out or who are pressured to move out, and sometimes you don't even need a third party to move out. I mean, your home's been flooded, you want to leave, and you want to get out. You're not willing to wait 5 years for the home to get to free of a floodplain risk. So a lot of these folks that are being displaced tend to be elderly individuals, very low income individuals. So we're seeing the most vulnerable populations leaving the community, and we're seeing these holding groups coming and buying up big swaths of property. So the mayor of Toa Baja came to us and asked us, how can I mitigate I'm going to mitigate the natural disaster risks, but how do I mitigate the social impact of what everybody concludes is a good thing? We all want to make sure that our communities are safe and far from risks, but that at times entails that the conditions of living will improve, and thus the houses are going to be more expensive, property rates are going to go up, it's going to be more expensive to live there, and so on. So how do we manage those things? And we do it through trying to leverage the vacant abandoned properties within the region. And we rolled out a 3-tier response. We started doing some community mapping. We identified all of the vacant abandoned properties within pilot 3 barrios or wards. We identified 3 wards and started inventorying. The colors, the red ones are properties that we were successfully able to include in our first phase of declarations. The blue points were ones that were in process, but it kind of demonstrates how we slowly kind of move from one side to another through these processes. But each of those little dots is a vacant abandoned property that's unoccupied and is currently in an abandoned state. So again, the first thing we do is we do community mapping. We meet with community leaders, city officials. In this case, we were visited by a number of city council members from this municipality, and we visit and we go out and we look at the properties. We tell them what we're looking for. We try to incorporate the community in every step, because again, when we're talking about vacant abandoned properties, and especially speculation within a hot market like the one we have now, neighbors who look out their window and see someone measuring a sidewalk or taking pictures of a house, it's kind of intimidating. And we try to address that by incorporating communities from the get-go. After we do inventories and mapping, we have a very good idea of what the abandonment situation is within a given community. We initiate a participatory code enforcement program. What do I mean by participatory? We incorporate these community leaders. Not only do they accompany us on inventories and community mapping efforts, but they also help us track down these owners. A lot of times that community knowledge surpasses whatever like a title study could do. You know, we have spent hours trying to get title studies on certain properties that just don't seem to be producing any results, and the neighbor is the one who's like, oh, that's owned by the son of the baker, you know. So then we'll go to the bakery and just knock on his door, and it turns out it's his son. So we will try to leverage that community knowledge to help identify these properties. Sometimes we'll come across owners within the properties or within the community of these homes, and we work with them, and we'll try to provide them with that legal support before they start getting nasty notices from the city. And again, we're trying to prevent having to initiate a nuisance abatement program and have these owners voluntarily do their work. And here in this photo, we have a community leader who is pointing to a profile. We put on the wall a profile of every property that we inventoried in that neighborhood, a photo of the property, the title information that we have, what are the risks that that property represents to the community, and also you know, the aerial photo from like a Google Maps. And we open it up for discussion, and we'll find out sometimes there are errors in public records, or we'll identify owners there, or even potential buyers will show up and say, hey, I'm trying to find the owner of this property, and we'll work with everybody trying to find a solution. Well, once these properties are declared a public nuisance and we have worked with the owners, you know, I call this our grand filter. We move you know, we work with owners on one hand. We try to be as flexible as possible getting this property fixed. For those properties that don't have owners, or they just have no interest, or they never show up, we will utilize a variety of tools to get that property into the municipality, and then we'll work with the municipality to create a community land bank, which itself can be its own webinar, but we try to leverage public government power. It's a nonprofit corporation that's ran by community members through a board and an advisory council. So it's amazing. You're working with an entity that kind of has the power of a local government, public corporation, but also on the other hand, it has the leverage of community input. And at the end of the day, you know, here's some before and after photos of some of our code enforcement efforts. These are properties that were vacant. This property here had its doors stripped. It had grass 5 feet tall in its lawn. And just through working with the owner, we can get the property fixed. And it's amazing, because I say that this photo here, we've seen investment from a property owner, and now this property is occupied, and all it cost was a $7 public notice from the municipality to initiate this code enforcement, and a sensitive program where we'll sit down with them and try to work with them. This was an amazing property where the property was falling in chunks. It looked like years ago the property was being rehabbed, and then it just stopped. When we were doing the community inventory, a neighbor came out, asked us what we were doing. We gave him the flyers. That neighbor contacted the owner, who in turn contacted us. And then eventually, throughout the course of a year, that owner stepped up and fixed their property. And here's another property where we started serving these code enforcement notices. We never got a response. And then finally someone called and said they took care of the problem. So when we went out to try to find this property, couldn't find it. Drove past it 3 or 4 times until we saw that it was the same property, but they just did a massive rehab. So, and I do want to end on this note. This is a perfect example of how we can convert a vacant abandoned property into an affordable home in a safe area for someone who's been displaced by a public disaster. Or a natural disaster. This is a property that was vacant abandoned in the Calle Guayama of San Juan. This property, we were able to acquire it, have it rehabbed, and then put the property on the market, but geared towards low, moderate income families that have CDBGDR relocation vouchers. They call it the R3 here. And I know that in New Orleans, they also had a relocation program where a family would have a voucher and would look on the market for a property. Fortunately, right now, there are no properties at that price. There's a shortage of housing in Puerto Rico at that price range. So we are finding families that have vouchers and they've been on the market for years trying to find a property and they just can't find it. And unfortunately, when you go into the public classifieds, we'll see notes saying this property is being sold, cash only. We do not accept any sort of CDBG-DR assistance. So unfortunately, a lot of these families are kind of they're butt out of this whole process. So we specifically marketed this property and our subsequent properties for R3 and CDBGDR voucher holders. We have this property. We're going to sell it at this rate. We could get more on it. We could sell it to speculators or LLCs, but we want to sell it to a person who has a homeownership voucher, and we're willing to wait the 3 or 4 months the government takes to process it. And this is one of those properties. This individual lost his home 7 years ago. He was sleeping in a shack, and we stumbled upon his case because we were contacted by his social worker when she saw our ad. So at the end of the day, this property, again, it was vacant abandoned. It was vandalized, had a nasty roof. We were able to get it fixed and get into the hands of an individual with an R3 voucher. And we have additional properties that have gone through this process. We're currently working on a few new properties with financing from the Housing Assistance Council, and constantly trying to find these pilots that can create models for future land banking in Puerto Rico. But this to us was, I guess, the most emotional of our cases. We're very happy to serve this individual who's looking for a home for years. And that, in general, is the summary of what we do. Again, it's hard for us to look at a vacant abandoned property, just as a nuisance. We always see them as an opportunity and try to find ways to work with communities and local governments to materialize that opportunity into something more productive and beneficial for our communities. So I hope I'm within the time frame and willing to field any questions.
Absolutely. Extraordinary. And what an exceptional case study there at the end to leave us with. Important work that you do. Thank you so much, Gallardo. We've got time for questions. So please raise your real hand, your virtual hand, type questions into the chat box, and Claire and I will call on them in order that we see them.
I think Christine is up first.
Christine.
We struggle to find my unmute. Hi, Gallardo. My name is Christine. This has been a super eye-opening, fantastic, very interesting presentation. I'm from Puerto Rico. I actually grew up in Levitan, Toa Baja. So, over the years, I've heard family members and friends struggling with all of these issues that you've kind of laid out for us. So it's super interesting. Now, I work private sector. And my question to you is, are there gaps or areas of opportunity that you see where the private sector can support the efforts that are being led by CRH, or this type of issue on the island?
Yes, definitely. There are gaps. And we are approached quite frequently by private entities, but most of the time there are housing developers or investors that are like, "Hey, how can I get on this?" And we try to emphasize, look, we're not handing out properties, we're not trying to sell properties, we're trying to support affordable housing, specifically for members within this community. So, there is no way to fix and rehab all of these properties with just nonprofit or public dollars. It is impossible. There's no way we're going to hit that scale. So the only way you can do it is by leveraging that support from the private sector. Now, the tricky part is, how do you leverage it in a way that is aligned with that community development and not worsen the situation through displacement or speculation and things of the sort. So right now, one of the biggest gaps we're seeing is access to finance. Right now in Puerto Rico, municipalities have no money; they're broke. I think like half of them are supposed to go bankrupt in a few months, if not a year or two. Um, so there is a lack of capital, and unfortunately, the traditional banking sector here in Puerto Rico has still not caught on. We've even spoken to like credit unions and things like that, the cooperativas here in Puerto Rico, but they seem to be, still tied to very traditional loan products. They're looking for things they could sell on the second market. So right now there is an issue with finance. So if there's some way for us to motivate more private entities to be like, you know what, I will finance these rehabs, and at the end of the day, um, I felt like it's recently been harder to get money lent to you than granted to you, because there's instances where like, hey, our land bank is willing to pay, like they're willing to pay a bank with interest to fix these 10 homes. It's just the product doesn't exist. So I would say that one of the biggest ways that the private sector could support is trying to bridge that gap between the finance gap that exists right now. But a lot of the work we're doing right now through community land banks, if it wasn't for philanthropy and grant dollars, they would not have access to funding to fix these homes. So I think that's one of the biggest areas where the private sector can step in. Um, and obviously, these I'm not sure what kind of work your organization does, but we do work with a lot of these firms that are helping municipalities with their local municipal plans. There's a program here called Whole Community Resiliency Program, where there are nonprofits and private providers who provide services, and we work with them. They have great data. They're really interested in supporting this work. But I'd say one of the biggest needs right now is the finance, trying to find ways to bridge that finance.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thanks, Gallardo. Thanks, Christine. Great question. Time for one more. Another question for Gallardo. Okay. And anyone? All right. We saw your email briefly on your last slide, Gallardo. If you would, pop it into the chat box, and then folks can reach out to you after the meeting, maybe with specific questions or related case studies from the region that they occupy and work in. And hope we build some connections from here. Great lessons from Puerto Rico that I think can be applied in many, many places across our region. So certainly appreciate your insights. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, your experiences with us, just how land use, land neglect, and the law, and this very interdisciplinary approach can really creatively work together in certain areas to not only advance long-term resiliency, but also simultaneously solve other community challenges. So really important work. Thank you so much again.
My pleasure.
And now let's move straight to partner sharing time. What announcements do you have for us today, partners?
And I see, Wendy, did you have a question or an announcement?
Nope, sorry. Just hit the hand raise instead of the clap. Sorry.
No problem.
No problem. Any other announcements? I know there's a lot going on in the region, and certainly send us your announcements at any time. We will send those, add those announcements, resources, and updates to our newsletter and our website. Arancesio, do I see your hand?
Yes, you do. Thank you. Thank you, Heather and Claire. I just wanted to mention that for those of you, in South Florida and the Caribbean, our regional team here at NOAA, called CCART, is hosting a sargassum webinar series. And this is spurred by the already another historic year for sargassum so far in the Caribbean. Obviously reaching up into South Florida. So I just wanted to share that. let me see how I can pop up in a link. But anyway, the Sargassum series starts on July 10th, and it will be a 5 webinars as part of the series, kind of encompassing anywhere from the 101 origins biology to mitigation efforts on sargassum. So if that is of an interest, I will pop in the very first one here to register, and then folks can take it from there.
Fantastic. Thank you for those timely workshops from NOAA.
Sure
Kate
thing.
Morano, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Not an update. I just wanted to thank you for your leadership over the past years, 3 years, 4 years. We have really, been lucky to have you in the executive director position, and we will miss you dearly. And yeah, I just wanted to, as we wrap up, say how much we're going to miss you and thank you for your leadership.
Aw, thanks, Kate. Yeah, and with that, I will move to wrap up the June monthly partnership meeting. And before I do, another very special thank you to Luis Gallardo from the Center for Habitat Reconstruction in Puerto Rico, and a thank you to each of you for joining today. Please join us again next month on Thursday, July 24th for our July SCDRP monthly partnership meeting that will be led by Claire McGrath. So as Kate said, next week I officially pass the torch on over to Claire, your new SCDRP director. It has been my tremendous honor to serve the partnership over the last 3 years. We have experienced tremendous growth, camaraderie, and change together. So as I say farewell today, a very warm thank you for your support, guidance, and friendship over these years. And thank you, and wishing you all the best.